you in your career, and this will help us pivot a little bit, is that you've made some shifts, but then you've also added to the already heavy workload that comes with being an orthodontist, that comes with being someone who is a professional and an entrepreneur and a CEO. How do you two have that discussion around, hey, honey, I'm going to do this other thing now. I'm going to add to this thing now. How's that gone for you?
You I'm the kind of guy who wakes up every day really genuinely in my heart of hearts, imagining that the day is going to be remarkable, not just good. It's going to be an amazing day. I found out later in life that that's a blessing, that not everybody's built that way, right? Because you only know the way you're built.
Sure.
And so I didn't realize that people don't wake up every day dreaming about how wonderful the day is going to be. And there was a period of time in my life at that point when I was with my dad and his partner they had multiple offices, and I tended to work with the partner's office. I would literally wake up every morning dreading going to work. I didn't want to get out of bed. I didn't want to, not because I didn't see good in the day, but I knew I was going to get abused. I was going to get beaten up. I was going to get talked down to. I was going to get made fun of. I was going to have nicknames thrown at me. I mean, he was just a real callous. And again, it begs the question, why was he my dad's partner? And it's a much longer story. But I didn't want to bring my dad into those conversations. It wasn't his business. I didn't need to make his life tough. So I just suffered it. Started seeing a GI doctor. I mean, I was getting sick physically.
Wow.
And so I think part of that made it easier, if you will, for me to have the conversation. Hey, Dad, I'm having a hard time here. It's never going to work out. Your style, my style. I can't tell you the exact words. And I could tell he was heartbroken by it. I mean, we all dream of your child going to dental school and working with you. And then all of a sudden they say, not going to do it.
Yeah.
It's heartbreaking. And I look back on my life now in my late 50s, and I don't know if you feel this way, Dino, because I think you turned 31
Early
last
50s.
year.
No.
I thought you were 31, right?
Sure. Let's go with that.
When you're in the sunset of your life and not the sunrise of your life, right? Which I see myself in, I think there's a clarity of life that comes to you. I'm not going to call it wisdom, but I wish I could go back and make penance for all the things that I could have done better in my life. It's not regret, but I get teary-eyed. I mean, I've cried over these things in the past in a cathartic way, that I wish I could have been more compassionate with my dad at that time. I wish I could have been more through his eyes. I wish I could have been a better college student, a better, young, just been there for my parents more. Like I wish, as a parent, I wish my kids would be, right. And so I wish if I could go back and do it all over again, I was compassionate. I could have been more compassionate. I could have been more mindful in how I had the conversation. It wasn't rude, nasty, or mean, and it came from a loving place. But I don't think it could have been too loving. I could have been better at it, and so can't change it. I don't regret it, but I remember him supporting me 100%.
That's so cool.
And there was no anger, hostility, and I was getting ready to get married, and so there was a lot of other good stuff going on in our lives. And I think what my parents have instilled in me is two things. One, sunk cost bias doesn't exist, right? I mean, it exists, but not in my life. So what you call fear, I just call no sunk cost bias, right? And for those out there who may not know, we often get, what's the right word? Anchored to positions because we've already done so much in that position.
Sure.
I've been working with my dad so long, it'd be stupid for me to move, or something. Or the financial benefit of me staying with my father and my mother and my sibling is so deep that if I were to go out, I have to start all over again. And that's,
Right.
the sunk cost fallacy, that,
Right.
the time and energy and effort you put into it is valuable to the point where it doesn't necessitate you moving on to the next stage. And for me, I was raised with, there is no such thing as sunk cost. You tried it, it didn't work, move on. Right?
Wow.
Start again. You're going to be successful. Go on to your next stage of your life. My mom went back to law school when I was 10 years old.
Wow.
So I think it played a huge role in my life in saying, you know what? As my rabbi used to say, it's never too late, but it's later than you think. And so, yeah, with my dad, it was never a second thought. And I think he saw the ease with which I did it. And I think whether he was putting on a brave face or not, I was just simply supportive of it. And it allowed me to really go on to that next chapter. And it was a great lesson for me to play, even if he was really hurting inside, which I think retrospectively probably was. It was a great way of sending me off into that next chapter of my life, so there wouldn't be any regrets, so that I wouldn't feel like I was letting anybody down. And I think it was just a model way for a parent to behave. And to this day, I'm in love with my parents, but I'm so impressed in the way he handled that.
Yeah, it's very impressive. And when you really think about it, it makes sense too with the type of person you are. And I'm even thinking of my own life of like, you would behave probably the same way with your kids in the sense of maybe even if you did have that disappointment inside, you're going to outwardly support them because you know that's what they need and you love them and you want them to have that. I love the sunk cost bias idea. So many people. And I know I've fallen victim to this myself of like, well, I'm already pot committed. I can't really, turn it around. I can't decide to fold right now and then go do something else. And this is where we see so much frustration and depression. And unfortunately, when that does happen, when you're feeling in that space of stuck because you've made one decision, you feel like you can't make another, you lash out on other people, you bring it out into your work. You're not as creative as you could
Right.
be. You're not the best leader you could be. So I love that idea of it. And I also appreciate that you talk about when that there's a physical reaction to a mental challenge, that you had to go see a doctor because you're having physical ailments based
Yeah.
upon the stress and the mental stress that's happening in your life. It's so crucial. And I hope what people are getting through this conversation is, number one, it's okay to talk about it. Number two, that we all have stuff, we all have stories, and it's a matter of how you actually react to it. It's a matter of how you can wake up in the day and say, you know what, how awesome is today going to be? Like,
Yeah.
this is going to be a great day. And I love that you said that, Glenn, because I probably do that to a point to where it almost annoys my kids and my wife a little bit. It's
No,
like,
no, it annoys them, Dino.
awesome,
It's
let's
not
do it.
almost annoying. It
That's it.
annoys.
It's always, it's like my wife is not a morning person, right? Speaking of wives, I want to end this section on this part because I thought it was so important that you talked about the wife support of what you got
Yeah.
with your wife when she said, "Hey, you know what? I believe in you." I often say that the number one motivator of men, I talk about the motivators for men and women, and the number one motivator for men is to feel like the superhero, to feel like what I do is causing a good positive difference, especially in the life of the one person we chose to
Yeah.
live life with on this planet. And if we can have our Lois Lane, who is like, oh my gosh, I support you in what you do, and I believe in you, and you got this. I've said before, where I live in Utah, there's a place about 4 hours away, 3 hours away called Price. And that's where a lot of coal mining is done. And I believe that for whatever reason, I grew up doing concrete construction. So I don't like that either. But coal mining to me has got to be one of the most challenging jobs that I could think about. You're in
Oh,
the
yeah.
dark, you're in the soot, it's ugly, it's all that stuff
And dangerous.
and dangerous. But if I was married, if I was a coal miner and I was married to my wife, I know that I married someone who would do what you said. Honey, you're the best coal miner in the world. If you want to go and be a coal, you go be a coal miner. You're going to be the best at it. You're amazing. I support you 100%. I have some questions maybe, but I do support you in that. And to have that,
And you'd work your tail off
you work your tail off
to
too.
make her proud of what you're doing.
That's right. And that's kind of where I was going to go with this is you in your career, and this will help us pivot a little bit, is that you've made some shifts, but then you've also added to the already heavy workload that comes with being an orthodontist, that comes with being someone who is a professional and an entrepreneur and a CEO. How do you two have that discussion around, hey, honey, I'm going to do this other thing now. I'm going to add to this thing now. How's that gone for you?
It's really funny. My wife and I, both Jewish, grew up in the Northeast. When we moved, we've lived everywhere, right? I was born in Chicago when Dad was in the service as a dentist, and then we moved to New York, and then I was trained in New York, and then we moved to Seattle for 17 years, and then I went to Nova Southeastern down in Florida, spent 3 years down there. Then now we're in Dallas, right? We've been all over the country, and when we're outside the Northeast and we go to dinner with friends, they think we're fighting, like we're communicating. We're
Oh,
loud.
nice.
If you ever read the Gottman books, which I
Yep.
have no doubt,
I
John
love
and
it.
Julie Gottman,
Love this.
living in Seattle, we heard all their stuff all the time.
Sure.
And for anybody out there, by the way, who's never read Fight Right, you need to read it. It's one of the greatest books in conflict, not just between husband and wife, but with everybody.
In
But
general, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing, amazing how it'll change your whole perspective on discussions with patients, team, partners, wife, husband, boyfriend, girlfriend. And we're volatile. We're both volatile types. It doesn't mean it's bad, but we know there's persuasion from the moment you start the conversation. And so we communicate really quickly, really loudly. People think we're fighting. We're not. You know, one therapist once said to my daughter's school counselor, the school counselor said, "I'm really worried about those two. I think they're, you know, I'm really worried about the dynamic." And the therapist said to her, "Don't you worry about those two. They're going to get buried next to each other, 60 years from now." And so we've always had that relationship that was loud, boisterous, but loving. And apparently, according to the Gottmans, there's probably a 10-to-1 positive bid to negative bid sort of relationship, which,
Yes.
is the key to long-term success.
Yep.
And so we don't have those conversations that often, believe it or not, Dino, when I say, you know what, I'm going to start Orthopreneurs, right? The group, there was a casual that oddly enough was one of the few times in my life that I've ever had the conversation with her. We're a very traditional family unit in that, she went for a master's degree. She has a master's in speech pathology. When we had kids, it was less expensive almost for us to have her raise the kids than for her to go to work.
Too. Yep.
And we decided together as a couple, it's probably better for you to be the influence in the kids' lives, and I'll just work harder, be a single income earner for this family. And that's the way it went. And so whenever I took on a new burden, it was already sort of tacitly implied that, Glenn, Alyssa, you go take care of the house, you take care of the kids, you take care of everything that's going on. I'm here to support you whenever I can. And her sort of marching orders to me were, you go out and you do the best you can, honey. And, if you feel there's something out there that's going to manifest more money in our lives, going to create something better in our lives, I trust you enough, go get it. We don't have to talk about it. And we would have the conversations. But I do remember, for those people out there who know what Orthopreneurs is, it started as a Facebook group in 2017 when there was a very famous blow up in one of the ortho groups. There was an argument. I can tell you who, it doesn't matter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was.
I didn't know the origins of that. That's interesting.
Yeah, and it's funny actually because Ben Burris started it, and but for Ben Burris, who's a controversial figure in orthodontics, but for him, most of these Facebook groups wouldn't even exist in orthodontics because he really was a driving factor in all of them. And him and my friend Chris Feldman, it was about Smile Direct Club, and they would go at it, and neither would back down, and they went toe to toe, and it was an epic battle one day in this Facebook group. Well, oddly enough, that morning, I had sort of felt the toxicity going on in the group, and I turned to my wife and we went for a walk with the dogs, which we never did. And I remember saying to her, I'm thinking of starting a group of my own. And she'd go for it, honey. What are you going to do it for? I said, just to help people, no ulterior motive. And I came back from the walk and my phone had blown up. There were like 25 messages. Did you see what happened? Did you see what happened? And it was at that moment I just posted and said, hey, I reached out to my friend Ben Christman out of Florida, who's my little bro in ortho residency. I said, here are 3 names. Which one of these do you think should be a good name? He says, Orthopreneurs. I said, good. And little did I know that there already was an Orthopreneurs marketing agency at that point.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, there was an Orthopreneur. I didn't know it. So I did it, started it. And next morning woke up, we had 700 people in the group and it just took off from there. So that's about as deep of a conversation as we've ever had, because unless it was going to truly impact our family unit in a bad way, which I really tried to avoid, she was going to say, sure, go get it, honey. Get them, Tiger. And that's how Orthopreneurs got started.
Hey, there's no reason to learn how to own your role on your own. If you like that clip, go ahead and click right here for another one. Or if you want to watch the entire podcast, go ahead and click right here. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.